foggy night, shadows creeping slow, whispers in the wind, where Johnny go? Blood on the hay, pitchfork gleam, midnight moon, a witness to a scream, barn doors creaking, secrets kept tight. Old man Joe seen a deadly sight, no justice found, just a broken plow, crows peck the ground, dead man's vow. Murder in the meadow, lies thick as dust, promises shattered, betrayed by trust, chaos in the cornfields.
I'm here with Country Diggers. Today we're going to talk about Billy the Kid. Now I'm going to sing the lyrics to the song by Chris Ledoux, Billy the Kid, and I'll be reading from history.com. And one of the articles in history.com is by Patrick J. Kiger, and the other one is, it doesn't tell the author. It says it's an assortment of authors. So, and I'll be reading a little excerpt from roadsideamerica.com. All right, Billy the Kid by Chris Ledoux. In the southern part of Texas, east and west of El Paso, where the mighty Franklin Mountains guard the trail to Mexico, there's a new widow crying and a hearse a rolling slow, and I guess that devil's passed this way again. There's a leathered sorrel stallion running through the Joshua trees, a young man in the saddle with his coattails in the breeze, got a 6-gun on his right hip and a rifle at his knee, and he's dealing in a game that he can't win. Poor Billy Bonnie, you're only 21. Pat Garrett's got your name on every bullet in his gun. Each notch you carved on your 6 guns got a bloody tale to tell. You're a mile ahead of Garrett and a step outside of hell. Them fancy clothes you're wearing and the women in your bed can't take away the faces of the men that you left dead as you ride across the Badlands with a price upon your head. Now that wheel of fortune starts to turn. Your reputation's grown till it's the biggest in the land, and there ain't a lot of people left who want to call your hand. And I guess you'll go down shooting just like all brand of men. When you shake hands with the devil, you get burned. Poor Billy Bonnie, you're only 21. Pat Garrett's got your name on every bullet in his gun. Each notch you carved on your 6 guns got a bloody tale to tell. You're a mile ahead of Garrett and a step outside of hell. Poor Billy Bonnie, you're only 21. Pat Garrett's got your name on every bullet in his gun. Each notch you carved on your 6 guns got a bloody tale to tell. You're a mile ahead of Garrett and a step outside of hell. All right, that was Chris Ledoux's version, and I figure everybody knows who Chris Ledoux is. Well, most everybody anyway. If you don't, look him up. All right, now on to the story. This is from history.com. On November 23rd, 1859, legendary outlaw Billy the Kid is born. The infamous Western outlaw known as Billy the Kid was most likely born in a poor Irish neighborhood on New York City's east side on November 23rd, 1859. Much about his early life is unknown or unverified. Before he was shot dead at age 21, Billy reputedly killed at least 9 people in the American West. Billy the Kid called himself William H. Bonney, but his original name was probably Henry McCarty. Bonnie was his mother Catherine's maiden name, and William was the first name of his mother's longtime companion, William Antrim, who acted as Billy's father after his biological father disappeared. Around 1865, Billy and his brother traveled west to Indiana with their mother and Antrim. And by 1870, the group was in Wichita, Kansas. They soon moved further west down the cattle trails, and in 1873, a legally married Catherine and William Antrim appeared on record in New Mexico territory. In 1874, Billy's mother died of lung cancer in Silver City. Billy soon left his brother and stepfather and took off into the New Mexico sagebrush. He worked as a ranch hand and in 1876 supposedly killed his first man. A group of Apache Indians in the Guadalupe Mountains. According to legend, it was not long before Billy killed another man, a blacksmith in Camp Grant, Arizona. Billy the Kid, as people began to call him, next found work as a rancher and bodyguard for John Tunstall, an English-born rancher who operated out of Lincoln, New Mexico. When members of a rival cattle gang killed Tunstall in 1878, Billy became involved in the so-called Lincoln County War. Enraged at Tunstall's murder, Billy became a leader of a vigilante posse of regulators sent to arrest the killers. No arrests were made, however. 2 of the murderers were shot dead by Billy's posse, and a worsening blood feud soon escalated into all-out warfare. After Billy's gang shot dead Lincoln Sheriff Bill Brady, who had sanctioned Tunstall's murder, Billy's enemies conspired with the territorial authorities to do away with the regulators. In July 1878, the rival gangs surrounded the house where Billy and his gang were staying just outside of town. The siege stretched on for 5 days, and a U.S. Army squadron from nearby Fort Stanton was called in. Still, Billy and his gang refused to surrender. Suddenly, the regulators made a mass escape, and Billy and several other regulators miraculously managed to shoot their way out of town. After more than 2 years on the run, Billy was arrested by Lincoln County Sheriff Pat Garrett, a man Billy had previously befriended before Garrett became a lawman. In April 1881, Billy was found guilty of the murder of Sheriff Brady and was sentenced to hang. On April 28th, 2 weeks before his scheduled execution, Billy wrestled a gun from one of his jailers and shot him. And another deputy dead, shot him and another deputy dead in a daring escape that received considerable national attention. On the night of July 14th, 1881, Garrett finally tracked Billy down at a ranch near Fort Sumner, New Mexico. He gained access to the house where Billy was visiting a girlfriend and then surprised him in the dark. Before the outlaw could offer resistance, Garrett fired a bullet into his chest. Billy the Kid was dead at age 21. All right, how did Billy the Kid die? Now, this is an article this is still history.com, and the article is written by Patrick J. Kiger. And how did Billy the Kid die? Even though a widely accepted account says the outlaw was shot by Sheriff Pat Garrett in New Mexico, murky details have led to other theories. Western outlaw Billy the Kid met his demise at about 12:30 a.m. on July 14, 1881, when he went to his friend Pat Maxwell's home in Fort Sumner, New Mexico, in search of a slice of beef for a late-night snack. As the story goes, just 21 years old, but already a murderer and who had escaped from jail and killed 2 guards in the process, made the mistake of walking into a darkened bedroom where Lincoln County Sheriff Pat Garrett was questioning Maxwell. Both Garrett and Billy were armed, but Garrett shot first, killing Billy. At least that's the most widely accepted version of events. But over the years, some of the murky details surrounding the death of Billy, whose real name was probably Henry McCarty, though he later went by the alias William Bonney, have proven to be fertile ground for alternative theories. Some have claimed that Garrett shot the wrong man, and Billy escaped. To complicate matters further, at least 2 men emerged decades later who were believed by some to be Billy. Men who claimed to be Billy the Kid after his death. As Dale L. Walker details in his book, Legends and Lies, Great Mysteries of the American West, one prospective Billy was John Miller, a farmer and horse trainer who lived in a small village in New Mexico near the Arizona border and died in 1937. His few possessions reportedly included a pistol with 21 notches on the grip, the same as the number of killings that some accounts attribute to Billy. The other, a resident of Hicko, Texas, named Ollie Brushy Bill Roberts, actually managed to get a meeting with the governor of New Mexico in 1950, in which he unsuccessfully sought a pardon for Billy's murders. He died soon afterwards. The persistent belief that Billy the Kid survived and hid out somewhere shouldn't be too much of a surprise, explains Jim Martelli, author of The Real Dirt on America's Frontier Outlaws, that examines the legends and the reality of various famed desperados of the American West. After all, similar stories have arisen after the deaths of other people who captured the public imagination, from Elvis Presley to Adolf Hitler. Things like this typically start out as bar stories. Montevelli says, you want someone to buy you a drink, so you say, I'm Billy the Kid. To add to the confusion, the actual facts about Billy the Kid haven't been easy to come by. Details of his early life are sketchy, and much of what was written about him just before and after his death was what Montevelli calls scurrilous literature. Sensationalized newspaper accounts and quickie books turned out by publishing houses. They didn't do a lot of actual research when they did these biographies, he says. Pat Garrett's account of Billy the Kid's death. In 1882 biography, The Authentic Life of Billy the Kid, noted desperado of the Southwest, whose deeds of daring and blood made his name a terror in New Mexico, Arizona, and northern Mexico, which was written by Garrett. His killer contains what seems to be the most credible account of the fatal confrontation, according to Montevelli. Instead of depicting an epic gunfight out of a dime novel, Garrett makes his shooting of the outlaws seem like an incredibly lucky break. That night, Garrett wrote, he and his 2 deputies, John W. Poe and Thomas McKinney, went to the ranch where Maxwell lived. A short distance from the property, Poe spotted an acquaintance who was camped out, and the lawmen dismounted and stopped to have coffee with him before heading on foot through an orchard to the house. Then they heard voices in Spanish, a language that Billy the Kid spoke as well as English, and the Gaelic of his parents' native country, Ireland. The 3 men concealed themselves as a man in a broad-brimmed hat, a dark vest, shirt, and pants walked past them. Though they didn't realize it, the man was Billy the Kid, who was headed for the house with the intention of carving for himself a piece of beef. Leaving the 2 deputies on the porch, Garrett slipped into the darkened house and quickly found the room where Maxwell was in bed. Garrett began questioning him, and Maxwell admitted that the outlaw had been around, though he wasn't sure where he was at the moment. Just then, a figure appeared in the door carrying a gun and a butcher knife, and asked in Spanish who was there. Let's see. And asked in Spanish who was there. Okay. Right here. Who is it, Pete? Garrett whispered to Maxwell. That's him, Maxwell responded. Billy the Kid realized that someone besides Maxwell was there in the darkness and raised his pistol within a foot of Garrett's chest. Who's that? He asked in Spanish. Garrett quickly drew his revolver and fired 2 shots. The first shot hit Kid in the chest. He never spoke, Garrett recalled. A struggle or two, a little strangling sound as he gasped for breath, and the Kid was with his many victims. When Garrett and the deputies examined Billy the Kid's gun, they found that he had 5 cartridges and 1 shell in the chamber, with the hammer resting on it. If he hadn't hesitated, Garrett might have been the one lying dead on the floor. It was the first time during all his life of Pearl that he ever lost his presence of mind or failed to shoot first, Garrett wrote. The next day, according to Garrett, a coroner's jury held an inquest determined that the dead man was Billy the Kid, and ruled that Garrett's killing of him had been a justifiable homicide. The outlaw's body was buried that same day. Garrett noted that the corpse went into the grave fully intact in order to discredit opportunists who were exhibiting skulls, fingers, and other body parts that they claimed had belonged to Billy the Kid. One medical gentleman has persuaded credulous idiots that he has all the bones strung upon wires, Garrett wrote with disdain. Billy the Kid's grave markers are lost. Unfortunately, the body isn't available for examination and DNA comparison with Billy the Kid's mother, Catherine Antrim, who is buried in Silver City, New Mexico. That's because the grave markers in Fort Sumner's old military cemetery were washed away in a flood in September of 1904, according to Richard Meltzer's book, Buried Treasures, Famous and Unusual Grave Sites in New Mexico History. A few decades later, 3 of Billy the Kid's surviving pallbearers were asked to help locate the spot where their friend had been buried, but they picked 3 different graves. As a result, it's impossible to tell which of the bodies in the cemetery are his. Retired Arizona State University history professor Robert J. Stahl tried unsuccessfully in 2015 to convince New Mexico officials to issue a belated death certificate for the outlaw, but his petition was rejected by the state Supreme Court. He also compiled a detailed list of the witnesses who saw the outlaw's body after his death and before his burial. Instead of hiding the body, Garrett's intention was to let people see whom he had shot and let those who desired pay their final respects to this much-liked young man, Stahl noted. That fact points to the likelihood that Billy the Kid was indeed killed that night in Fort Sumner in the manner that Garrett described, but that still isn't likely to dispel the rumors. People are always willing to believe alternative theories. Okay, and we got a roadsideamerica.com little snippet right here. The grave in Fort Sumner has no body in it, said Sue Land, director of the Billy the Kid Museum. They have a grave, but unless you ask, they never mention that not having a body. They never mention not having a body. So if y'all go there, if anybody goes there to the Billy the Kid Museum, ask if his body is in the grave. All right, hope y'all enjoyed. And if you haven't, I've only seen one season of it, but if you haven't, watch the new Billy the Kid series. That is pretty good. Now, I only watched the first series because the rest you have to pay for, and I don't want to pay. But if you get a chance, watch it. It's pretty good. The first season was. So, see you back soon.